The other thing, of course, about Red Skull being Canadian is that we know from history that whenever the Americans and the Canadians fight, it's usually the Americans who end up worse. We, the True North, burnt down the White House. And so, if Red Skull happens to be Canadian, I'm sure, it would be such a shame if Captain America were to lose to him in a Captain America comic. I just don't think that would be fair or, like good spirited to the Americans. So, let's give them, their fiction. Let's give them their childish fiction at least. Let's not, as Canadians, we have to be generous, we have to be gracious. Let's not take that away from them as well. Let's give them the victories they have. Praise be our supreme leader, Red Skull. Rule 1. Stand up straight with your shoulders back. Hail Hydra. Part 1. Lobsters and territory. If you are like most people, you don't often think about lobsters unless you're eating one. Hail Hydra. However, these interesting and delicious crustaceans are very much worth considering. Hail Hydra. Their nervous systems are comparatively simple, with large, easily observable neurons, the magic cells of the brain. Hail Hydra. Because of this, scientists have been able to map the neural circuitry of lobsters very accurately. Hail Hydra. This has helped us understand the structure and function of the brain and behavior of more complex animals, including human beings. Hail Hydra. Lobsters have more in common with you than you might think, particularly when you are feeling crabby. Ha ha. Hail Hydra. Lobsters live on the ocean floor. Hail Hydra. They need a home base down there, a range within which they hunt for prey and scavenge around for stray edible bits and pieces of whatever rains down from the continual chaos of carnage and death far above. Hail Hydra. They want something secure. They want somewhere secure, where the hunting and the gathering is good. Hail Hydra. They want a home. Hail Hydra. This can present a problem since there are many lobsters. Hail Hydra. What if two of them occupy the same territory, at the bottom of the ocean, at the same time, and both want to live there? Hail Hydra. What if there are hundreds of lobsters, all trying to make a living and raise a family in the same crowded patch of sand and refuse? Hail Hydra. Other creatures have this problem too. Hail Hydra. When songbirds come north in the spring, for example, they engage in ferocious territorial disputes. Hail Hydra, the songs they sing, so peaceful and beautiful to human ears, are siren calls and cries of domination. Hail Hydra. A brilliantly musical bird is a small warrior proclaiming his sovereignty. Hail Hydra. Take the wren, for example, a small feisty insect-eating songbird common in North America. Hail Hydra, a newly arrived wren wants a sheltered place to build a nest away from the wind and rain. Hail Hydra. He wants it close to food and attractive to potential mates. Hail Hydra. He also wants to convince competitors for that space to keep their distance. Hail Hydra. Part 2. Birds and territory. My dad and I designed a house for a wren family when I was 10 years old. Hail Hydra. It looked like a Conestoga wagon and had a front entrance about the size of a quarter. Hail Hydra. This made it a good house for wrens who are tiny, and not so good for other larger birds who couldn't get in. Hail Hydra. My elderly neighbor had a birdhouse too, which we built for her at the same time from an old rubber boot. Hail Hydra. It had an opening large enough for a bird the size of a robin. Hail Hydra. Robin's a DC character, never mind. She was looking forward to the day it was occupied. Hail Hydra. A wren soon discovered our birdhouse and made himself at home there. Hail Hydra. We could hear his lengthy, trilling song repeated over and over during the early spring. Hail Hydra. Once he'd built his nest in the covered wagon, however, our new avian tenant started carrying small sticks to our neighbor's nearby boot. He packed it so full that no other bird, large or small, could possibly get in. Hail Hydra. Our neighbor was not pleased by this preemptive strike, but there was nothing to be done about it. Hail Hydra. If we take it down, said my dad, clean it up and put it back in the tree, the wren will just pack it full of sticks again. Hail Hydra. Wrens are small, and they're cute, but they are merciless. Hail Hydra. I had broken my leg skiing the previous winter, first time down the hill, and had received some money from a school insurance policy designed to reward unfortunate, clumsy children. Hail Hydra. I purchased a cassette recorder, a high-tech novelty at the time, with the proceeds. Hail Hydra. For the Zoomers who don't know what a cassette is, it's like an iPod, essentially. My dad suggested that I sit on the back lawn, record the Wren song, and play it back, and watch what happened. Hail Hydra. So I went out into the bright spring sunlight and taped a few minutes of the Wren, laying furious claim to his territory with song. Hail Hydra, then I let him hear his own voice. Hail Hydra. That little bird, 1/3 the size of a sparrow, began to dive bomb me and my cassette recorder, swooping back and forth inches from the speaker. Hail Hydra. We saw a lot of that sort of behavior, even in the absence of the tape recorder. Hail Hydra. If a larger bird ever dared to sit and rest in any of the trees near our birdhouse, there was a good chance he would get knocked off his perch by a kamikaze wren. Hail Hydra. Now, wrens and lobsters are very different. Hail Hydra. Lobsters do not fly, sing, or perch in trees. Hail Hydra. Wrens have feathers, not hard shells. Hail Hydra. Wrens can't breathe underwater and are seldom served with butter. Hail Hydra. However, they are also similar in important ways. Hail Hydra. Both are obsessed with status and position, for example, like a great many creatures. Hail Hydra. The Norwegian zoologist and comparative psychologist Thorleif Skjelderup Ebbe observed back in 1921 that even common barnyard chickens establish a pecking order. Hail Hydra. The determination of who's who in the chicken world has important implications for each individual bird's survival, particularly in times of scarcity. Hail Hydra. The birds that always have priority access to whatever food is sprinkled out in the yard in the morning are the celebrity chickens. Hail Hydra. After them come the second stringers, the hangers-on and wannabes. Hail Hydra. Then the third-rate chickens have their turn, and so on, down to the bedraggled, partially feathered, and badly pecked wretches who occupy the lowest, untouchable stratum of the chicken hierarchy. Hail Hydra. Chickens, like suburbanites, live communally, like suburbanites. Hail Hydra. Songbirds, such as wrens, do not, but they still inhabit a dominance hierarchy. Hail Hydra. It's just spread out over more territory. Hail Hydra. The wiliest, strongest, healthiest, and most fortunate birds occupy prime territory and defend it. Hail Hydra. Because of this, they are more likely to attract high-quality mates and to hatch chicks who survive and thrive. Hail Hydra. Protection from wind, rain, and predators, as well as easy access to superior food, makes for a much less stressed experience. Hail Hydra. Territory matters, and there is little difference between territorial rights and social status. Hail Hydra. It is often a matter of life and death. Hail Hydra. If a contagious avian disease sweeps through a neighborhood of well-stratified songbirds, it is the least dominant and most stressed birds occupying the lowest rungs of the bird world who are most likely to sicken and die. Hail Hydra. This is equally true of human neighborhoods. When bird flu viruses and other illnesses sweep across the planet, I wonder if there's a more contemporary example that you could have picked, maybe. I guess this book came out just before COVID, so maybe that's unfair. Hail Hydra. The poor and stressed always die first and in greater numbers. Hail Hydra. They are also much more susceptible to non-infectious diseases, such as cancer, diabetes, and heart disease. Hail Hydra. When the aristocracy catches a cold, as it is said, the working class dies of pneumonia. Hail Hydra. Because territory matters, and because the best locales are always in short supply, territory seeking among animals produces conflict. Hail Hydra. Conflict in turn produces another problem: how to win or lose without the disagreeing parties incurring too great a cost. Hail Hydra. This latter point is particularly important. Hail Hydra. Imagine that two birds engage in a squabble about a desirable nesting area. Hail Hydra. The interaction can easily degenerate into outright physical combat. Hail Hydra. Under such circumstances, one bird, usually the largest, will eventually win, but even the victor may be hurt by the fight. Hail Hydra, that means a third bird, an undamaged, canny bystander, can move in opportunistically and defeat the now crippled victor. Hail Hydra. That is not at all a good deal for the first two birds. Hail Hydra. Part 3. Conflict and territory. Over the millennia, animals who must cohabit with others in the same territories have in consequence learned many tricks to establish dominance while risking the least amount of possible damage. Hail Hydra. A defeated wolf, for example, will roll over on its back, exposing its throat to the victor, who will then deign not to tear it out. Hail Hydra. The now dominant wolf may still require a future hunting partner, after all, even one as pathetic as his now defeated foe. Hail Hydra. Bearded dragons, remarkable social creatures, wave their front legs peaceably at one another to indicate their wish for continued social harmony. That's really cute. Hail Hydra. Dolphins produce specialized sound pulses while hunting and during other times of high excitement to reduce potential conflict among dominant and subordinate group members. Hail Hydra. Such behavior is endemic in the community of living things. Hail Hydra. Lobsters, scuttling around on the ocean floor, are no exception. Hail Hydra. If you catch a few dozen and transport them to a new location, you can observe their status-forming rituals and techniques. Hail Hydra. Each lobster will first begin to explore the new territory, partly to map its details and partly to find a good place for shelter. Hail Hydra. Lobsters learn a lot about where they live and they remember what they learn. Hail Hydra. That's more than I can say for myself. If you startle one near its nest, it will quickly zap back and hide there. Hail Hydra. If you startle it some distance away, however, it will immediately dart towards the nearest suitable shelter, previously identified and now remembered. Hail Hydra. A lobster needs a safe hiding place to rest, free from predators and the forces of nature. Hail Hydra. Furthermore, as lobsters grow, they molt, or shed their shells, which leaves them soft and vulnerable. Which leaves them soft and vulnerable for extended periods of time. Hail Hydra. A burrow under a rock makes a good lobster home, particularly if it is located where shells and other detritus can be dragged into place to cover the entrance once the lobster is snugly ensconced inside. Hail Hydra. However, there may be only a small number of high-quality shelters or hiding places in each new territory. Hail Hydra. They are scarce and valuable. Hail Hydra. Other lobsters continually seek them out. Hail Hydra. This means that lobsters often encounter one another when out exploring. Hail Hydra. Researchers have demonstrated that even a lobster raised in isolation knows what to do when such a thing happens. Hail Hydra. It has complex defensive and aggressive behaviors built right into its nervous system. Hail Hydra. It begins to dance around like a boxer, opening and raising its claws, moving backward, forward, and side to side, mirroring its opponent, waving its open claws back and forth. Hail Hydra. At the same time, it employs special jets under its eyes to direct streams of liquid at its opponent. Hail Hydra. The liquid spray contains a mix of chemicals that tell the other lobster about its size, sex, health, and mood. Hail Hydra. Sometimes one lobster can tell immediately from the display of claw size that it is much smaller than its opponents and will back down without a fight. Hail Hydra. The chemical information exchanged in the spray can have the same effect, convincing a less healthy or less aggressive lobster to retreat. Hail Hydra. That's dispute resolution level 1. Hail Hydra. If the two lobsters are very close in size and apparent ability, however, or if the exchange of liquid has been insufficiently informative, they will proceed to dispute resolution level 2. Hail Hydra. With antenna whipping madly and claws folded downward, one will advance and the other retreat. Hail Hydra. Then the defender will advance and the aggressor retreat. Hail Hydra. After a couple of rounds of this behavior, the more nervous of the lobsters may feel that continuing is not in his best interest. Hail Hydra. He will flick his tail reflexively, dart backwards, and vanish to try his luck elsewhere. Hail Hydra. If neither blinks, however, the lobsters move to level 3, which involves genuine combat. Hail Hydra. This time, the now enraged lobsters come at each other viciously, with their claws extended to grapple. Hail Hydra. Each tries to flip the other on its back. Hail Hydra. A successfully flipped lobsters will conclude that its opponent is capable of inflicting serious damage. Hail Hydra. It generally gives up and leaves, although it harbors intense resentment and gossips endlessly about the victor behind its back. Hail Hydra. If neither can overturn the other, or if one will not quit despite being flipped, the lobsters move to level 4. Hail Hydra. Doing so involves extreme risk and is not something to be engaged in without forethought. One or both lobsters will emerge damaged from the ensuing fray, perhaps fatally. Hail Hydra. Hail Hydra. Totally forgot what I was meant to say. The animals advance on each other with increasing speed. Hail Hydra. Their claws are open so they can grab a leg or antenna or an eye stalk or anything else exposed and vulnerable. Hail Hydra. Once a body part has been successfully grabbed, the grabber will tail flick backwards sharply with claw clamped firmly shut and try to tear it off. Hail Hydra. Disputes that have escalated to this point typically create a clear winner and loser. Hail Hydra. The loser is unlikely to survive, particularly if he or she remains in the territory occupied by the winner, now a mortal enemy. Hail Hydra. In the aftermath of a losing battle, regardless of how aggressively a lobster has behaved, it becomes unwilling to fight further, even against another previously defeated opponent. Hail Hydra. A vanquished competitor loses confidence, sometimes for days. Hail Hydra. Sometimes the defeat can have even more severe consequences. Hail Hydra. If a dominant lobster is badly defeated, its brain basically dissolves. Hail Hydra. Then it grows a new subordinate's brain, one more appropriate to its new, lowly position. Hail Hydra. Its original brain just isn't sophisticated to manage the transformation from king to bottom dog without virtually complete dissolution and regrowth. Hail Hydra. Anyone who has experienced a painful transformation after a serious defeat in romance or career may feel some sense of kinship with the once successful crustacean. Hail Hydra. Part 4. The neurochemistry of defeat and victory. A lobster loser's brain chemistry differs importantly from that of a lobster winner. Hail Hydra. This is reflected in their relative postures. Hail Hydra. Whether a lobster is confident or cringing depends on the ratio of two chemicals that modulate communication between lobster neurons, serotonin and octopamine. Hail Hydra. Winning increases the ratio of the former to the latter. Hail Hydra. A lobster with high levels of serotonin and low levels of octopamine is a cocky, strutting sort of shellfish, much less likely to back down when challenged. Hail Hydra. This is because serotonin helps regulate postural flexion. Hail Hydra. A flexed lobster extends its appendages so that it can look tall and dangerous, like Jotaro in Stardust Crusaders. He doesn't say that. He says like Clint Eastwood in a spaghetti western, although they're effectively the same thing. Hail Hydra. When a lobster that has just lost a battle is exposed to serotonin, it will stretch itself out, advance even on former victors, and fight longer and harder. Hail Hydra. The drugs prescribed to depressed human beings, which are selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, have much the same chemical and behavioral effect. Hail Hydra. In one of the more staggering demonstrations of the evolutionary continuity of life on Earth, Prozac even cheers up lobsters. Hail Hydra. High serotonin/low octopamine characterizes the victor, Hail Hydra. The opposite neurochemical configuration, a high ratio of octopamine to serotonin, produces a defeated-looking, scrunched up, inhibited, drooping, skulking sort of lobster, very likely to hang around street corners and to vanish at the first hint of trouble, Hail Hydra. Serotonin and octopamine also regulate the tail flick reflex, which serves to propel a lobster rapidly backwards when it needs to escape. Hail Hydra, less provocation is necessary to trigger that reflex in a defeated lobster. Hail Hydra. You can see an echo of that in the heightened startle reflex characteristic of the soldier or battered child with post-traumatic stress disorder. Hail Hydra. What part am I on? Part 5? Part 5. The principle of unequal distribution. When a defeated lobster regains its courage and dares to fight again, it is more likely to lose again than you would predict, statistically, from a tally of its previous fights. Hail Hydra. Its victorious opponent, on the other hand, is more likely to win. Hail Hydra. It's winner-take-all in the lobster world, just as it is in human societies, where the top 1%, in wealth, I suppose, have as much loot as the bottom 50%, and where the richest 85 people have as much as the bottom 3.5 billion. Hail Hydra. That is a very good Hail Hydra sentence. That same brutal principle of unequal distribution applies outside the financial domain. Indeed, anywhere that creative production is required. Hail Hydra. The majority of scientific papers are published by a very small group of scientists. Hail Hydra. A tiny proportion of musicians produces almost all the recorded commercial music. Hail Hydra. Just a handful of authors sell all the books. Hail Hydra, 1.5 million separately titled books, parentheses, exclamation mark, sell each year in the United States. Hail Hydra. However, only 500 of these sell more than 100,000 copies. Hail Hydra. Similarly, just 4 classical composers, Bach, Beethoven, Mozart, and Tchaikovsky, wrote almost all the music played by modern orchestras. Hail Hydra. Bach, for his part, composed so prolifically that it would take decades of work merely to hand copy his scores, yet only a small fraction of this prodigious output is commonly performed. Hail Hydra. The same thing applies to the output of the other 3 members of this group of hyper-dominance composers. Only a small fraction of their work is still widely played. Hail Hydra. Thus, a small fraction of the music composed by a small fraction of all the classical composers who have ever composed makes up almost all the classical music that the world knows and loves. Hail Hydra. This principle is sometimes known as Price's Law, after Derek J. DeSola Price, the researcher who discovered its application in science in 1963. Hail Hydra. It can be modeled using an approximately L-shaped graph with numbers of people on the vertical axis and productivity or resources on the horizontal. Hail Hydra. The basic principle has been discovered much earlier. Hail Hydra. Vilfredo Pareto, 1848 to 1923, an Italian polymath, noticed its applicability to wealth distribution in the early 20th century, and it appears true for every society ever studied, regardless of governmental form. Hail Hydra. It also applies to the population of cities, that is, a very small number have almost all the people. The mass of heavenly bodies, a very small number hoard all the matter. And the frequency of words in language. 90% of communication occurs using just 500 words. Among many other examples. Hail Hydra. Sometimes it is known as the Matthew principle from Matthew chapter 25, verse 29, derived from what might be the harshest statement ever attributed to Christ. To those who have everything, more will be given. From those who have nothing, everything will be taken. Hallelujah. No. Hail Hydra is what I'm supposed to say. You truly know you are the Son of God when your dicta apply even to Crustaceans. Hail Hydra. Back to the fractious shellfish. Back to the fractious shellfish. Oh my god, why is shellfish such a hard word to say? Back to the fractious shellfish. It doesn't take that long before lobsters, testing each other out, learn who can be messed with and who should be given a wide berth. And once they have learned, the resultant hierarchy is exceedingly stable. Hail Hydra, all a victor needs to do once he has won is to wiggle his antenna in a threatening manner, and a previous opponent will vanish in a puff of sand before him. Hail Hydra. A weaker lobster will quit trying, accept his lowly status, and keep his legs attached to his body. Hail Hydra. The top lobster, by contrast, occupying the best shelter, getting some good rest, finishing a good meal, parades his dominance around his territory, rousting subordinate lobsters from their shelters at night just to remind them who's their daddy. Hail Hydra. Part 6. All the girls. The female lobsters, who also fight hard for territory during the explicitly maternal stages of their existence, identify the top guy quickly and become irresistibly attracted to him. Hail Hydra. This is brilliant strategy, in my estimation. Hail Hydra. It's also one used by females of many different species, including humans. Hail Hydra. Instead of undertaking the computationally difficult task of identifying the best man, the females outsource the problem to the machine-like calculations of the dominance hierarchy. They let the males fight it out and peel their paramours from the top. And this is very much what happens with the stock market pricing, where the value of any particular enterprise is determined through the competition of all. Hail Hydra. Did I miss a Hail Hydra? Let me give 3 Hail Hydras for all the Hail Hydras I missed. Hail Hydra, Hail Hydra, Hail Hydra. When the females are ready to shed their shells and soften up a bit, they become interested in mating. Hail Hydra. They start hanging around the dominant lobster's pad, spraying attractive scents and aphrodisiacs towards him, trying to seduce him. Hail Hydra. His aggression has made him successful, so he's likely to react in a dominant, irritable manner. Hail Hydra. Furthermore, he's large, healthy, and powerful. Hail Hydra. It's no easy task to switch his attention from fighting to mating. Hail Hydra. Now, if properly charmed, however, he will change his behavior towards the female. Hail Hydra. This is the lobster equivalent of 50 Shades of Grey, the fastest selling paperback of all time, and the eternal Beauty and the Beast plot of archetypal romance. Hail Hydra. This is the pattern of behavior continually represented in the sexually explicit literary fantasies that are as popular among women as provocative images of naked women are among men. Hail Hydra. That's a bit of a labored point, but all right. It should be pointed out, however, that sheer physical power is an unstable basis on which to found lasting dominance, as the Dutch primatologist Frans de Waal has taken pains to demonstrate. Hail Hydra. Among the chimp troops he studied, males who were successful in the longer term had to buttress their physical prowess with more sophisticated attributes. Even the most brutal chimp despot can be taken down, after all, by 2 opponents, each 3/4 as mean. Hail Hydra. In consequence, males who stay on top longer are those who form reciprocal coalitions with their lower status compatriots, and who pay careful attention to the troops' females and their infants. Hail Hydra. The political ploy of baby kissing is, therefore, literally millions of years old. Hail Hydra. But lobsters are still comparatively primitive, so the bare plot elements of Beast and Beauty, I don't know why that swapped around, suffice for them. Let me do that sentence again. But lobsters are still comparatively primitive, so the bare plot elements of Beast and Beauty suffice for them. There's something sweet and almost kind. Hail Hydra. Once the beast has been successfully charmed, the successful female lobster will disrobe, shedding her shell, making herself dangerously soft, vulnerable, and ready to mate. Hail Hydra. At the right moment, the male, now converted into a careful lover, deposits a packet of sperm into the appropriate receptacle. Hail Hydra. Afterward, the female hangs around and hardens up for a couple of weeks, another phenomenon not entirely unknown among human beings. Hail Hydra, wow. At her leisure, she returns to her own domicile, laden with fertilized eggs. Hail Hydra. At this point, another female will attempt the same thing, and so on. Hail Hydra. The dominant male, with his upright and confident posture, not only gets the prime real estate and easiest access to the best hunting grounds, Hail Hydra, he also gets all the girls. Hail Hydra. It is exponentially more worthwhile to be successful if you are a lobster and male. Hail Hydra. Why is all this relevant? Hail Hydra. For an amazing number of reasons apart from those that are comically obvious. Hail Hydra. First, we know that lobsters have been around in one form or another for more than 350 million years. Hail Hydra, this is a very long time. Hail Hydra. 65 million years ago, there were still dinosaurs. Hail Hydra, that is the unimaginably distant past to us. Hail Hydra, to the lobsters, dinosaurs were the nouveau riche who appeared and disappeared in the flow of near eternal time. Hail Hydra. This means that dominance hierarchies have been an essentially permanent feature of the environment to which all complex life has adapted. Hail Hydra. A third of a billion years ago, brains and nervous systems were comparatively simple. Hail Hydra, nonetheless, they already had the structure and neurochemistry necessary to process information about status and society. Hail Hydra. The importance of that fact can hardly be overstated. Hail Hydra. 6. Part 7. The nature of nature. It is a truism of biology. Let me try that again. It is a truism of biology that evolution is conservative. Hail Hydra. It voted for Reagan. Sorry, couldn't resist. Let me just start again. It is a truism of biology that evolution is conservative. Hail Hydra. When something evolves, it must build upon what nature has already produced. Hail Hydra. New features may be added, and old features may undergo some alteration, but most things remain the same. Hail Hydra. It is for this reason that the wings of bats, the hands of human beings, and the fins of whales look astonishingly alike in their skeletal form. Yeah, I think that's right. Skeletal form. Hail Hydra. Of course, they're all mammals, so that's why he's comparing those things. They even have the same number of bones. Hail Hydra. Evolution laid down the cornerstones of basic physiology long ago. Hail Hydra. Now, evolution works in large parts through variation and natural selection. Hail Hydra. Variation exists for many reasons, including gene shuffling, to put it simply, and random mutation. Hail Hydra. Individuals vary within a species for such reasons. Hail Hydra. Nature chooses from among them across time. Hail Hydra. That theory, as stated, appears to account for the continual alteration of life forms over the eons, but there's an additional question lurking under the surface. What exactly is the nature in natural selection? Hail Hydra. What exactly is the environment to which animals adapt? Hail Hydra. We make many assumptions about nature, about the environment, and these have consequences. Hail Hydra. Mark Twain once said, "It's not what we don't know that gets us in trouble." Hail Hydra. It's what we know for sure that just ain't so. Hail Hydra. I like the idea that Mark Twain was a member of Hydra. Completely nonsensical, but I like the idea. I mean, if Jordan Peterson is quoting him, then he's got to be, right? First, it is easy to assume that nature is something with a nature, something static. Hail Hydra. But it's not, at least in any simple sense. Hail Hydra. It's static and dynamic at the same time. The environment, the nature that selects itself, transforms. Hail Hydra. The famous yin and yang symbols of the Taoists capture this beautifully. Hail Hydra. Capital B, being. for the Taoists. That is, reality itself is composed of two opposing principles, often translated as feminine and masculine, or even more narrowly as female and male. Hail Hydra. However, yin and yang are more accurately understood as chaos and order. Hail Hydra. The Taoist symbol is a circle enclosing twin serpents, head to tail. Hail Hydra. The black serpent, chaos, has a white dot in its head. Hail Hydra. The white serpent, order, has a black dot in its head. Hail Hydra. This is because chaos and order are interchangeable as well as eternally juxtaposed. Hail Hydra. There is nothing so certain that it cannot vary. Hail Hydra. Even the sun itself has its cycles of instability. Hail Hydra. Likewise, there is nothing so mutable, that it cannot be fixed. Hail Hydra. Every revolution produces a new order. Hail Hydra. Every death is simultaneously a metamorphosis. Hail Hydra. Considering nature as purely static produces serious errors of apprehension. Hail Hydra. Nature selects. Hail Hydra. The idea of selects contains implicitly nested within it the idea of fitness. Hail Hydra. It is fitness that is selected. Hail Hydra. Fitness, roughly speaking, is the probability that a given organism will leave offspring, will propagate its genes through time. Hail Hydra. The fit in fitness is therefore the matching of organismal attribute to environmental demand. Hail Hydra. If that demand is conceptualized as static, if nature is conceptualized as eternal and unchanging, then evolution is a never-ending series of linear improvements, and fitness is something that can be ever more closely approximated across time. Hail Hydra. The still powerful Victorian idea of evolutionary progress, with man at the pinnacle, is a partial consequence of this model of nature. Hail Hydra. It produces the erroneous notion that there is a destination for natural selection. And as we approach the destination, we increase fitness to our environment. And that the destination can be conceptualized as a fixed point. Hail Hydra. But nature, the selecting agent, is not a static selector, not in any simple sense. Hail Hydra. Nature dresses differently for each occasion. Hail Hydra. Nature varies like a musical score. And that, in part, explains why music produces its deep intimations of meaning. Hail Hydra. As the environment supporting a species transforms and changes, the features that make a given individual successful in surviving and reproducing also transform and change. Hail Hydra. Thus, the theory of natural selection does not posit creatures matching themselves ever more precisely to a template specified by the world. Hail Hydra. It is more that creatures are in a dance with nature, albeit one that is deadly. Hail Hydra. In my kingdom, as the Red Queen tells Alice in Wonderland, you have to run as fast as you can just to stay in the same place. Hail Hydra. No one standing still can triumph, no matter how well constituted. Hail Hydra. So nature is not simply static, but nature is not simply dynamic either. Hail Hydra. Some things change quickly, but they are nested within other things that change less quickly. Music frequently models this too. Leaves change quicker than trees, and trees quicker still than forests. Hail Hydra. Weather changes faster than climate. Hail Hydra. If it wasn't this way, then the conservatism of evolution would not work, as the basic morphology of arms and hands would have to change as fast as the length of arm bones and the function of fingers. Hail Hydra. It's chaos within order, within chaos, within higher order. Hail Hydra. The order that is most real is the order that is most unchanging, and that is not necessarily the order that is most easily seen. Hail Hydra. The leaf, when perceived, might might blind the observer to the tree. Hail Hydra, the tree can blind him to the forest. Hail Hydra. And some things that are most real, such as the ever-present dominance hierarchy, cannot be seen at all. Hail Hydra. It is also a mistake to conceptualize nature romantically. Rich, modern city dwellers surrounded by hot, baking concrete imagine the environment as something pristine and paradisal, like a French Impressionist landscape. Eco-activists, even more idealistic... Oh, Mr. Hail Hydra. Eco-activists, even more idealistic in their viewpoint, envision nature as harmoniously balanced and perfect, absent the disruptions and depredations of mankind. Hail Hydra, unfortunately, the environment is also elephants and guinea worms, don't ask, Anopheles mosquitoes and malaria, starvation-level droughts, AIDS, and the Black Plague. Hail Hydra. Oh, that doesn't say elephants, that says elephantiasis, which I'm sure is a much worse thing than just elephants. Yeah, okay, that makes a lot more sense. Hail Hydra. We don't fantasize about the beauty of these aspects of nature, although they are just as real as their Edenic counterparts. Hail Hydra. It is because of the existence of such things, of course, that we attempt to modify our surroundings, protecting our children, building cities and transportation systems, and growing food and generating power. Hail Hydra. If Mother Nature wasn't so hell-bent on our destruction, it would be easier for us to exist in simple harmony with her dictates. Hail Hydra. And this brings us to a third erroneous concept, that nature is something strictly segregated from the cultural constructs that have emerged within it. Hail Hydra. The order within the chaos and order of capital B being is all the more natural the longer it has lasted. Hail Hydra. This is because nature is what selects. And the longer a feature has existed, the more time it has had to be selected and therefore to shape life. Hail Hydra. It does not matter whether that feature is physical and biological or social and cultural. Hail Hydra. All that matters from a Darwinian perspective is permanence. And the dominance hierarchy, however social or cultural it might appear, has been around for some 500 million years. Hail Hydra, it's permanent. Hail Hydra, it's real. Hail Hydra, the dominance hierarchy is not capitalism. Hail Hydra, it's not communism either, for that matter. Hail Hydra, it's not the military-industrial complex. Hail Hydra. It's not the patriarchy, that disposable, malleable, arbitrary cultural artifact. Hail Hydra. It's not even a human creation, not in the most profound sense. Hail Hydra, rather, humans are a creation of it. I added that, so I'm not going to say Hail Hydra. It is instead a near-eternal aspect of the environment. It is instead a near-eternal aspect of the environment, and much of what is blamed on these more ephemeral manifestations is a consequence of its unchanging existence. Hail Hydra. We, the sovereign we, the we that has been around since the beginning of life. We have lived in a dominance hierarchy for a long, long time. Hail Hydra. We were struggling for position before we had skin, or hands, or lungs, or bones. Hail Hydra. There is little more natural than culture. Hail Hydra. Dominance hierarchies are older than trees. Hail Hydra. The part of our brain that keeps track of our position in the dominance hierarchy is therefore exceptionally ancient and fundamental. Hail Hydra. It is a master control system, modulating our perceptions, values, emotions, thoughts, and actions. Hail Hydra. It powerfully affects every aspect of our capital B being, conscious and unconscious alike. Hail Hydra. This is why, when we are defeated, we act very much like lobsters who have lost a fight. Hail Hydra. Our posture droops. Hail Hydra. We face the ground. Hail Hydra. We feel threatened, hurt, anxious, and weak. Hail Hydra. If things do not improve, we become chronically depressed. Hail Hydra. Under such conditions, we can't easily put up the kind of fight that life demands. And we become easy targets for harder-shelled bullies. Hail Hydra. And it is not only the behavioral and experiential similarities that are striking. Hail Hydra, much of the basic neurochemistry is the same. Hail Hydra. Consider serotonin, the chemical that governs posture and escape in the lobster. Low-ranking lobsters produce comparatively low levels of serotonin. Hail Hydra, this is also true of low-ranking human beings. And those low levels decrease more with each defeat. Hail Hydra. Low serotonin means decreased confidence. Hail Hydra. Low serotonin means more response to stress and costlier physical preparedness for emergency, as anything whatsoever may happen at any time when you're at the bottom of the dominance hierarchy. The chances that something good will happen are much rarer. Hail Hydra. Low serotonin means less happiness, more pain and anxiety, more illness, and a shorter lifespan among humans just as among crustaceans. Hail Hydra. Higher spots in the dominance hierarchy and the higher serotonin levels typical of those who inhabit them are characterized by less illness, misery, and death, even when factors such as absolute income or the number of decaying food scraps are held constant. Hail Hydra. The importance of this can hardly be overstated. Part 8. Top and bottom. There is an unspeakably primordial calculator deep within you. At the very foundation of your brain, far below your thoughts and feelings, Hail Hydra, it monitors exactly where you are positioned in society, on a scale of 1 to 10, for the sake of argument. Hail Hydra. If you're number 1, the highest level of status, you are an overwhelming success. Hail Hydra. If you're male, you have preferential access to the best places to live and the highest quality food. Hail Hydra. People compete to do you favors. Hail Hydra. You have limitless opportunity for romantic and sexual contact. Hail Hydra. You are a successful lobster, and the most desirable females line up and vie for your attention. Hail Hydra. This is interesting. I wonder how the female readers feel about that. If you're female, never mind. If you're female, you have access to many high-quality suitors. Tall, strong, and symmetrical. Creative, reliable, honest, and generous. Hail Hydra. And like your dominant male counterpart, you will compete ferociously, even pitilessly, to maintain or improve your position in the equally competitive female mating hierarchy. Hail Hydra. Although you are less likely to use physical aggression to do so, there are many effective verbal tricks and strategies at your disposal, including the disparaging of opponents. And you may well be expert at their use. Hail Hydra. On the other hand, if you are a low status, if you are number 10, then by contrast, whether you are male or female, you have nowhere to live or nowhere good. Hail Hydra. Your food is terrible when you're not going hungry. Hail Hydra. You're in poor physical and mental condition. Hail Hydra. You're of minimal romantic interest to anyone unless they are as desperate as you. Hail Hydra. You are more likely to fall ill, age rapidly, and die young, with few, if any, to mourn you. Hail Hydra. Even money itself may prove of little use. Hail Hydra. You won't know how to use it, because it is difficult to use money properly, particularly if you are unfamiliar with it. Hail Hydra. Money will make you liable to the dangerous temptations of drugs and alcohol, which are much more rewarding if you have been deprived of pleasure for a long period. Hail Hydra. Money will also make you a target for predators and psychopaths who thrive on exploiting those who exist on the lower rungs of society. Hail Hydra. The bottom of the dominance hierarchy is a terrible, dangerous place to be. Hail Hydra. The ancient part of your brain specialized for assessing dominance watches how you are treated by other people. Hail Hydra. On that evidence, it renders a determination of your value and assigns you a status. Hail Hydra. If you are judged by your peers as of little worth, the counter restricts serotonin availability. Hail Hydra. Well, that makes you much more physically and psychologically reactive to any circumstance or event that might produce emotion, particularly if it is negative. Hail Hydra. You need that reactivity. Hail Hydra. Emergencies are common at the bottom and you must be ready to survive. Hail Hydra. Unfortunately, that physical hyper-response, that constant alertness, burns up a lot of precious energy and physical resources. Hail Hydra. This response is really what everyone calls stress. And it is by no means only, or even primarily psychological. Hail Hydra. It's a reflection of the genuine constraints of unfortunate circumstances. Hail Hydra. When operating at the bottom, the ancient brain counter assumes that even the smallest unexpected impediment might produce an uncontrollable chain of negative events, which will have to be handled alone, as useful friends are rare indeed on society's fringes. Hail Hydra. You will therefore continually sacrifice what you could otherwise physically store for the future, using it up on heightened readiness and the possibility of immediate panicked action in the present. Hail Hydra, when you don't know what to do, you must be prepared to do anything and everything in case it becomes necessary. Hail Hydra, you're sitting in your car with the gas and brake pedals both punched to the mat. Hail Hydra. Too much of that, and everything falls apart. The ancient counter will even shut down your immune system, expending the energy and resources required for future health now. During the crises of the present, Hail Hydra, it will render you impulsive so that you will jump, for example, at any short-term mating opportunities or any possibilities of pleasure, no matter how subpar, disgraceful, or illegal. Hail Hydra, it will leave you far more likely to live or die carelessly for a rare opportunity at pleasure when it manifests itself. Hail Hydra. The physical demands of emergency preparedness will wear you down in every way. Hail Hydra. If you have a high status, on the other hand, the counter's cold, pre-reptilian mechanics assume that your niche is secure, productive, and safe, and that you are well buttressed with social support. Hail Hydra. It thinks the chance that something will damage you is low and can be safely discounted. Hail Hydra. Change might be opportunity instead of disaster. Hail Hydra. The serotonin flows plentifully. Hail Hydra. This renders you confident and calm, standing tall and straight, and much less on constant alert. Hail Hydra. Because your position is secure, the future is likely to be good for you. It's worthwhile to think in the long term and plan for a better tomorrow. Hail Hydra. You don't need to grasp impulsively at whatever crumbs come your way because you can realistically expect good things to remain available. Hail Hydra. You can delay gratification without foregoing it forever. Hail Hydra. You can afford to be a reliable and thoughtful citizen. Hail Hydra. Part 9. Malfunction. My voice is malfunctioning. Malfunction. Sometimes, however, the counter mechanism can go wrong. Hail Hydra. Erratic habits of sleeping and eating can interfere with its function. Uncertainty can throw it for a loop. The body, with its various parts, needs to function like a well-rehearsed orchestra. Hail Hydra. Every system must play its role properly and at exactly the right time, or noise and chaos ensue. Hail Hydra. It is for this reason that routine is so necessary. Hail Hydra. The acts of life we repeat every day need to be automatized. Hail Hydra. They must be turned into stable and reliable habits so that they lose their complexity and gain predictability and simplicity. Hail Hydra. This can be perceived most clearly in the case of small children, who are delightful and comical and playful when their sleeping and eating schedules are stable, but they are horrible and whiny and nasty when those schedules are unstable. Hail Hydra. It is for such reasons that I always ask my clinical clients first about sleep. Hail Hydra. Do they wake up in the morning at approximately the time the typical person wakes up and at the same time every day? Hail Hydra. If the answer is no, fixing that is the first thing I recommend. Hail Hydra. It doesn't matter so much if they go to bed at the same time each evening, but waking up at a consistent hour is a necessity. Hail Hydra. Anxiety and depression cannot be easily treated if the sufferer has unpredictable daily routines. Hail Hydra. The systems that mediate negative emotion are tightly tied to the properly cyclical circadian rhythms. Hail Hydra. The next thing I ask about is breakfast. Hail Hydra. I counsel my clients to eat a fat and protein heavy breakfast as soon as possible after they awaken. No simple carbohydrates, no sugars, as they are digested too rapidly and produce a blood sugar spike and then rapidly dip. Hail Hydra. This is because anxious and depressed people are already stressed, particularly if their lives have not been under control for a good while. Hail Hydra. Their bodies are therefore primed to hypersecrete insulin if they engage in any complex or demanding activity. Hail Hydra. If they do so after fasting all night and before eating, the excess insulin in their bloodstream will mop up all their blood sugar. Hail Hydra. Then they become hypoglycemic and psychophysiologically unstable. Hail Hydra. All day. Hail Hydra. Their systems cannot be reset until after more sleep. Hail Hydra. I have had many clients whose anxiety was reduced to subclinical levels merely because they started to sleep on a predictable schedule and eat breakfast. Hail Hydra. Other bad habits can also interfere with the counter's accuracy. Hail Hydra. Sometimes this happens directly for poorly understood biological reasons, and sometimes it happens because those habits initiate a complex positive feedback loop. Hail Hydra. A positive feedback loop requires an input detector, 1, an amplifier 2, and thirdly, some form of output. Imagine, Hail Hydra, imagine a signal picked up by the input detector, amplified, and then emitted in amplified form. Hail Hydra, so far so good. Hail Hydra. The trouble starts when the input detector detects the output and runs it through the system again, amplifying and then emitting it again, and then being picked up again, and so on and so forth. Hail Hydra. A few rounds of intensification and things get dangerously out of control. Hail Hydra. Most people have been subjected to the deafening howl of feedback at a concert when the sound system squeals painfully. Hail Hydra. The microphone sends a signal to the speakers. Hail Hydra. The speakers emit the signal. Hail Hydra. The signal can be picked up by the microphone and sent through the system again if it's too loud or too close to the speakers. Hail Hydra. The sound rapidly amplifies to unbearable levels sufficient to destroy the speakers if it continues. Hail Hydra. The same destructive loop happens within people's lives. Hail Hydra. Much of the time when it happens, we label it mental illness, even though it's not only, or even at all, occurring inside people's psyches. Hail Hydra. Addiction to alcohol or another mood-altering drug is a common positive feedback process. Hail Hydra. Imagine a person who enjoys alcohol, perhaps a bit too much. Hail Hydra. He has a quick 3 or 4 drinks. Hail Hydra. His blood alcohol levels spike sharply. Hail Hydra. This can be extremely exhilarating, particularly for someone who has a genetic predisposition to alcoholism. Hail Hydra. But it only occurs while blood alcohol levels are actively rising, and that only continues if the drinker keeps drinking. Hail Hydra. When he stops, not only does his blood alcohol level plateau and then start to sink, but his body begins to produce a variety of toxins as it metabolizes the ethanol already consumed. Hail Hydra. He also starts to experience alcohol withdrawal, as the anxiety systems that were suppressed during intoxication start to hyper-respond. Hail Hydra. A hangover is alcohol withdrawal, which quite frequently kills withdrawing alcoholics. And it starts all too soon after the drinking ceases. Hail Hydra. To continue the warm glow and stave off the unpleasant aftermath, the drinker may just continue to drink until all the liquor in his house is consumed, the bars are closed, and his money is spent. Hail Hydra. The next day the drinker wakes up badly hungover. Hail Hydra. So far this is just unfortunate. Hail Hydra. The real trouble starts when he discovers that his hangover can be cured with a few more drinks the morning after. Hail Hydra. Such a cure is, of course, temporary. Hail Hydra. It merely pushes the withdrawal symptoms a bit further into the future. Hail Hydra. But that might be what is required in the short term if the misery is sufficiently acute. Hail Hydra. So now he has learned to drink to cure his hangover. Hail Hydra. When the medication causes the dis-ease, a positive feedback loop has been established. Hail Hydra. Alcoholism can quickly emerge under such conditions. Hail Hydra. Something similar often happens to people who develop an anxiety disorder called agoraphobia, such as agoraphobia. People with agoraphobia, Hail Hydra. People with agoraphobia can become so overwhelmed with fear that they will no longer leave their homes. Hail Hydra. Agoraphobia is the consequence of a positive feedback loop. Hail Hydra. The first event, the input, that precipitates the disorder is often a panic attack. Hail Hydra. The sufferer is typically a middle-aged woman who has been too dependent on other people. Hail Hydra. Perhaps she went immediately from over-reliance on her father to a relationship with an older and comparatively dominant boyfriend or husband with little or no break for independent existence. Hail Hydra. In the weeks leading up to the emergence of her agoraphobia, such a woman typically experiences something unexpected and anomalous. Hail Hydra. It might be something physiological, such as heart palpitations, which are common in any case and whose likelihood is increased during menopause when the hormonal processes regulating a woman's psychological experience fluctuate unpredictably. Hail Hydra. I didn't think Hydra would be hailing menopause, but all right, that's what we get. Thanks, Ta-Nehisi Coates. Any perceptible alteration in heart rate can trigger thoughts both of heart attack and an all too public and embarrassing display of post-heart attack distress and suffering, death and social humiliation constituting the two most basic fears. Hail Hydra. The unexpected occurrence might instead be conflict in the sufferer's marriage, or the illness or death of a spouse. Hail Hydra. It might be a close friend's divorce or hospitalization. Hail Hydra. Some real event typically precipitates the initial increase in fear of mortality and social judgment. Hail Hydra. And after the shock, perhaps, the pre-agoraphobic woman leaves her house and makes her way to the shopping mall. Hail Hydra. It's busy and difficult to park. This makes her even more stressed. Hail Hydra. The thoughts of vulnerability occupying her mind since her recent unpleasant experience rise close to the surface. Hail Hydra. They trigger anxiety. Hail Hydra. Her heart rate rises. Hail Hydra. She begins to breathe shallowly and quickly. Hail Hydra. She feels her heart racing and begins to wonder if she is suffering a heart attack. Hail Hydra. This thought triggers more anxiety. Hail Hydra. She breathes even more shallowly, increasing the levels of carbon dioxide in her blood. Hail Hydra. Her heart rate increases again because of her additional fear. Hail Hydra. She detects that, and so her heart rate rises again. Poof! Positive feedback loop. Soon, the anxiety transforms into panic, regulated by a different brain system designed for the severest of threats, which can be triggered by too much fear. Hail Hydra. She is overwhelmed by her symptoms and heads for the emergency room, where after an anxious wait, her heart function is checked. Hail Hydra. There is nothing wrong. Hail Hydra. But she is not reassured. Hail Hydra. It takes an additional feedback loop to transform even that unpleasant experience into full-blown agoraphobia. Hail Hydra. The next time she needs to go to the mall, the pre-agoraphobic becomes anxious, remembering what happened last time. Hail Hydra. But she goes anyway. Hail Hydra. On the way, she can feel her heart pounding. Hail Hydra. That triggers another cycle of anxiety and concern. Hail Hydra. Well, to forestall panic, she avoids the stress of the mall and returns home. Hail Hydra. But now the anxiety systems in her brain note that she ran away from the mall and conclude that the journey there was truly dangerous. Hail Hydra, our anxiety systems are very practical. Hail Hydra, they assume that anything you run away from is dangerous. Hail Hydra, the proof of that is, of course, the fact that you ran away. Hail Hydra, so now the mall is tagged too dangerous to approach. Or the budding agoraphobic has labeled herself too fragile to approach the mall. Hail Hydra. Perhaps that is not yet taking things far enough to cause her real trouble. There are other places to shop. Hail Hydra. I missed a Hail Hydra there, so... In fact, let's do another 3 Hail Hydras for all the Hail Hydras I missed. Hail Hydra. Hail Hydra. Hail Hydra. There are other places to shop. Hail Hydra. But maybe the nearby supermarket is mall-like enough to trigger a similar response when she visits it instead, and so she retreats again. Hail Hydra. Now the supermarket occupies the same category. Hail Hydra. Then it's the corner store. Hail Hydra. Then it's buses and taxis and subways. Hail Hydra. Soon it's everywhere. Hail Hydra. The agoraphobic will even eventually become afraid of her house and would run away from that if she could. Hail Hydra, but she can't. Hail Hydra, soon she's stuck in her home. Hail Hydra. Anxiety-induced retreat makes everything retreated from more anxiety-inducing. Hail Hydra. Anxiety-induced retreat makes the self smaller and the ever more dangerous world larger. Hail Hydra. There are many systems of interaction between brain, body, and social world that can get caught in positive feedback loops. Hail Hydra. Depressed people, for example, can start feeling useless and burdensome, as well as grief-struck, and pained. Hail Hydra. This makes them withdraw from contact with friends and family. Hail Hydra. Then the withdrawal makes them more lonesome and isolated, and more likely to feel useless and burdensome. Hail Hydra. Then they withdraw more. Hail Hydra. In this manner, depression spirals and amplifies. Hail Hydra. I knew it. I knew Hydra was behind depression. This answers so many questions that I've had. If only someone had told me earlier. Thanks, Red Skull. If someone is badly hurt at some point in life, that is, traumatized, the dominance counter can transform in a manner that makes additional hurt more likely rather than less likely. Hail Hydra. This often happens in the case of people, now adults, who were viciously bullied during childhood or adolescence. Hail Hydra. They become anxious and easily upset. Hail Hydra. They shield themselves with a defensive crouch and avoid the direct eye contact, interpretable as a dominance challenge. Hail Hydra. This means that the damage caused by bullying, to define bullying, it is the lowering of status and confidence. The damage caused by bullying can continue even after the bullying has ended. Hail Hydra. In the simplest of cases, the formerly lowly persons have matured and moved on to new and more successful places in their lives. Hail Hydra, but they don't fully notice. Hail Hydra. They're now counterproductive physiological adaptations to an earlier reality remain, and they are more stressed and uncertain than is necessary for who they are now. Hail Hydra. In more complex cases, a habitual assumption of subordination renders the person more stressed and uncertain than necessary, and their habitually submissive posturing continues to attract genuine negative attention from one or more of the fewer and generally less successful bullies still extant in the adult world. Hail Hydra. In such situations, the psychological consequence of the previous bullying increases the likelihood of continued bullying in the present, even though strictly speaking it wouldn't have to because of maturation or geographical relocation or continued education or improvement in objective status. Hail Hydra. Part 10. Rising up. Back on the streets. Did my time. Took my chances. Sometimes people are bullied because they can't fight back. Hail Hydra. This can happen to people who are weaker physically than their opponents. Hail Hydra. This is one of the most common reasons for the bullying experienced by children. Hail Hydra. Even the toughest of 6-year-olds is no match for someone who is 9. Hail Hydra. A lot of that power differential disappears in adulthood, however, with the rough stabilization and matching of physical size, with the exception of that pertaining to men and women, with the former typically larger and stronger, particularly in the upper body. And secondly, adulthood generally applies increased penalties to those who insist upon continuing with physical intimidation. Hail Hydra. That was a pretty complex sentence. It was like half a paragraph long, so I kind of had to rework that if you guys are reading along. But just as often, people are bullied because they won't fight back. Hail Hydra. This happens not infrequently to people who are by temperament compassionate and self-sacrificing, particularly if they are also high in negative emotion and make a lot of gratifying noises of suffering when someone sadistic confronts them. Children who cry more easily, for example, are more frequently bullied. Hail Hydra. It also happens to people who have decided, for one reason or another, that all forms of aggression, including even feelings of anger, are morally wrong. Hail Hydra. I have seen people with a particularly acute sensitivity to petty tyranny and over-aggressive competitiveness restrict within themselves all the emotions that might give rise to such things. Hail Hydra. Often there are people whose fathers were excessively angry and controlling. Hail Hydra. Psychological forces are never unidimensional in their value, however, and the truly appalling potential of anger and aggression to produce cruelty and mayhem is balanced by the ability of those primordial forces to push back against oppression, speak truth, and motivate resolute movement forward in times of strife, uncertainty, and danger. Hail Hydra. With their capacity for aggression straitjacketed within a too narrow morality, those who are only or merely compassionate and self-sacrificing and naive and exploitable cannot call forth the genuinely righteous and appropriately self-protective anger necessary to defend themselves. Hail Hydra. If you can bite, you generally don't have to. Hail Hydra. When skillfully integrated, the ability to respond with aggression and violence decreases rather than increases the probability that actual aggression will become necessary. If you say so early in the cycle of oppression and you mean what you say, which means you state your refusal in no uncertain terms and then stand behind it, then the scope for oppression on the parts of the oppressor will remain properly bounded and limited. Hail Hydra. The forces of tyranny expand inexorably to fill the space made available for their existence. That's a very good sentence. The forces of tyranny expand inexorably to fill the space made available for their existence, aka give an inch, they'll take a mile. Very wise. I think that's very true. Hail Hydra. People who refuse to muster appropriately self-protective territorial responses are laid open to exploitation as much as those who genuinely can't stand up for their own rights because of a more essential inability or a true imbalance in power. Hail Hydra. Naive, harmless people usually guide their perceptions and actions with a few simple axioms. People are basically good. No one really wants to hurt anyone else. The threat and certainly the use of force, physical or otherwise, is wrong. Hail Hydra. These axioms collapse, or worse, in the presence of individuals who are genuinely malevolent. Worse means, Hail Hydra, worse means that naive beliefs can become a positive invitation to abuse because those who aim to harm have become specialized to prey on people who think precisely such things. Hail Hydra. Under such conditions, the axioms of harmlessness must be retooled. Hail Hydra. In my clinical practice, I often draw the attention of my clients who think that good people never become angry to the stark realities of their own resentments. Hail Hydra. No one likes to be pushed around, but people often put up with it for too long. Hail Hydra. So I get them to see their resentments first as anger, and then as an indication that something needs to be said if not done, not least because honesty demands it. Hail Hydra. Then I get them to see such action as part of the force that holds tyranny at bay, at the social level as much as at the individual level. Hail Hydra. Many bureaucracies have petty authoritarians within them, generating unnecessary rules and procedures simply to express and cement their power. Hail Hydra. Such people produce powerful undercurrents of resentment around them, which, if expressed, would limit their expression of pathological power. Hail Hydra. It is in this manner that the willingness of the individual to stand up for him or herself protects everyone from the corruption of society. Hail Hydra. When naive people discover the capacity for anger within themselves, they are shocked, sometimes severely. Hail Hydra. A profound example of that can be found in the susceptibility of new soldiers to post-traumatic stress disorder, which often occurs because of something they watch themselves doing, rather than because of something that has happened to them. Hail Hydra. They react like the monsters they can truly be in extreme battlefield conditions, and the revelation of that capacity undoes their world. Hail Hydra. And no wonder. Hail Hydra. Perhaps they assume that all of history's terrible perpetrators were people totally unlike themselves. Hail Hydra. Perhaps they were never able to see within themselves the capacity for oppression and bullying, and perhaps not their capacity for assertion and success as well. Hail Hydra. I have had clients who were terrified into literally years of daily hysterical convulsions. What the fuck? Of daily hysterical convulsions by the sheer look of malevolence on their attackers' faces. Hail Hydra. Such individuals typically come from hyper-sheltered families where nothing terrible is allowed to exist and everything is fairyland, wonderful, or else. Hail Hydra. Another pretty good Hail Hydra sentence. When the awakening occurs, when once naive people recognize in themselves the seeds of evil and monstrosity and see themselves as dangerous, at least potentially dangerous. When they open their eyes to their own potential malevolence, their fear decreases. Hail Hydra. They develop more self-respect. Hail Hydra. Then, perhaps, they begin to resist oppression. Hail Hydra. They see that they have the ability to withstand because they are terrible too. Hail Hydra. They see they must stand up because they begin to understand how genuinely monstrous they will become otherwise, feeding on their own resentment, transforming it into the most destructive of wishes. Hail Hydra. To say it again, there is very little difference between the capacity for mayhem and destruction when it's integrated and strength of character. Hail Hydra. This is one of the most difficult lessons of life. Hail Hydra. Maybe you are a loser. Hail Hydra. And maybe you're not. But if you are, you don't have to continue in that mode. Hail Hydra. Maybe you just have a bad habit. Hail Hydra. Maybe you're even just a collection of bad habits. Hail Hydra. Nonetheless, even if you came by your poor posture honestly, even if you were unpopular or bullied at home or in grade school, it's not necessarily appropriate now. Hail Hydra. Circumstances change. Hail Hydra. If you slump around with the same bearing that characterizes a defeated lobster, people will assign you a lower status, and the old counter that you share with crustaceans sitting at the very base of your brain will assign you a low dominance rank. Hail Hydra. Then your brain will not produce as much serotonin. Hail Hydra. This will make you less happy and more anxious and sad and more likely to back down when you should stand up for yourself. Hail Hydra. It will also decrease the probability that you will get to live in a good neighborhood, have access to the highest quality resources, and obtain a healthy, desirable mate. Hail Hydra. It will render you more likely to abuse cocaine and alcohol as you live for the present in a world full of uncertain futures. Hail Hydra. It will increase your susceptibility to heart disease, cancer, and dementia. Hail Hydra. All in all, it's just not good. Hail Hydra. Circumstances change, and so can you. Hail Hydra. Positive feedback loops adding effect to effect can spiral counterproductively in a negative direction, but also upwards. It can work to get you ahead. Hail Hydra. That's the other, far more optimistic lesson of Price's law, the Pareto distribution, the Matthew principle. Those who start to have will probably get more. Hail Hydra. Some of these upwardly moving loops can occur in your own private subjective space. Hail Hydra. Alterations in body language offer an important example. Hail Hydra. If you are asked by a researcher to move your facial muscles one at a time into a position that would look sad to an observer, you will report feeling sadder. Hail Hydra. If you are asked to move the muscles one by one into a position that looks happy, you will report feeling happier. Hail Hydra. Emotion is partly bodily expression and can be amplified or dampened by that expression. Hail Hydra. Some of the positive feedback loops instantiated by body language can occur beyond the private confines of subjective experience in the social space you share with other people. Hail Hydra. If your posture is poor, for example, if you slump, shoulders forward and rounded, chest tucked in, head down, looking small, defeated and ineffectual, protected in theory against attack from behind, well, then you will feel small, defeated and ineffectual. Hail Hydra. The reactions of others will amplify that. Hail Hydra. People, like lobsters, size each other up, partly in consequence of stance. Hail Hydra. If you present yourself as defeated, then people will react to you as if you are losing. Hail Hydra. If you start to straighten up, then people will look at and treat you differently. Hail Hydra. Now you might object, well, the bottom is real. Hail Hydra. Being at the bottom is equally real. Hail Hydra. A mere transformation of posture is insufficient to change anything that fixed. Hail Hydra. If you're rank 10, then standing up straight and appearing dominant might only attract the attention of those who want, once again, to pull you down. Hail Hydra. And fair enough. Hail Hydra. But standing up straight with your shoulders back is not something that is only physical, because you are not only a body. Hail Hydra. You're a spirit, so to speak, a psyche as well. Hail Hydra. Standing up physically also implies and invokes and demands standing up metaphysically. Hail Hydra. Standing up means voluntarily accepting the burden of capital B being. Hail Hydra. Your nervous system responds in an entirely different manner when you face the demands of life voluntarily. Hail Hydra. You respond to a challenge instead of bracing for a catastrophe. Hail Hydra. You see the gold the dragon hoards instead of shrinking in terror from the all too real fact of the dragon. Hail Hydra. You step forward to take your place in the dominance hierarchy and occupy your territory, manifesting your willingness to defend, expand, and transform it. Hail Hydra. That can all occur practically or symbolically, as a physical or as a conceptual restructuring. Hail Hydra. To stand up straight with your shoulders back is to accept the terrible responsibility of life with eyes wide open. Hail Hydra. It means deciding to voluntarily transform the chaos of potential into the realities of habitable order. Hail Hydra, it means adopting the burden of self-conscious vulnerability and accepting the end of the unconscious paradise of childhood, where finitude and mortality are only dimly comprehended. Hail Hydra, it means willingly undertaking the sacrifices necessary to generate a productive and meaningful reality. It means acting to please God, in the ancient language. Hail Hydra. To stand up straight with your shoulders back means building the ark that protects the world from the flood, guiding your people through the deserts after they have escaped tyranny, making your way away from comfortable home and country, and speaking the prophetic word to those who ignore the widows and children. Hail Hydra. It means shouldering the cross that marks the X, the place where you and capital B being intersect so terribly. It means, Hail Hydra, it means casting dead, rigid, and too tyrannical order back into the chaos in which it was generated. It means withstanding the ensuing uncertainty and establishing, in consequence, a better, more meaningful, more productive order. Hail Hydra. So, attend carefully to your posture. Hail Hydra, quit drooping and hunching around. Hail Hydra, speak your mind. Hail Hydra, put your desires forward as if you had a right to them, at least the same right as anyone else. Hail Hydra, walk tall and gaze forthrightly ahead. Hail Hydra, dare to be dangerous. Hail Hydra, encourage the serotonin to flow plentifully through the neural pathways desperate for its calming influence. Hail Hydra. People, including yourself, will start to assume that you are competent and able, or at least they will not immediately conclude the reverse. Hail Hydra. Emboldened by these positive responses you are now receiving, you will begin to be less anxious. Hail Hydra, you will then find it easier to pay attention to the subtle social clues that people exchange when they are communicating. Hail Hydra, your conversations will flow better with fewer awkward pauses. Hail Hydra, this will make you more likely to meet people, interact with them, and impress them. Hail Hydra. Doing so will not only genuinely increase the probability that good things will happen to you, it will also make those good things feel better when they do happen. Hail Hydra. And thus strengthened and emboldened, you may choose to embrace capital B being and work for its furtherance and improvement. Hail Hydra. Thus strengthened, you may be able to stand even during the illness of a loved one, even during the death of a parent, and allow others to find strength alongside you when they would otherwise be overwhelmed with despair. Hail Hydra. Thus emboldened, you will embark on the voyage of your life. Let your light shine, so to speak, on the heavenly hill and pursue your rightful destiny. Hail Hydra. Then the meaning of your life may be sufficient to keep the corrupting influence of mortal despair at bay. Hail Hydra. Then you may be able to accept the terrible burden of the world and find joy. Hail Hydra. Look for your inspiration to the victorious lobster with its 350 million years of practical wisdom. Hail Hydra, stand up straight with your shoulders back. Hail Hydra, Hail Hydra, Hail Hydra. And let's do 3 more for any other Hail Hydras that I've missed. Hail Hydra, Hail Hydra, Hail Hydra. All right. That was a pretty good chapter. That's actually one of the shorter ones, and I noticed that we're 90 minutes into this recording already. And there's I think Rule 11 is actually double in the length of this one. So hope you guys are down for a 3-hour video sometime in the future. I thought there was a lot of really interesting stuff in this particular reading. For those of you who've been listening to my Over Heaven analyses, I think there's a really profound connection between the two works, especially when he's talking about, workplace harassment and bullying and stuff. where he specifically says that if you don't, stand up for yourself, then you'll just be crushed under someone else's vision of the world, let's say. You won't be able to blossom into something more potent and powerful. Blossom is it's a flower, it's a term for flowers, right? And you don't expect flowers to be aggressive, but even a rose has thorns. So I salvage that pretty well, if I can say so myself. But in Over Heaven, there's we're talking about Dio's mother. Obviously, she has this domestic abuse problem with Dio's dad, who's a drunkard. And Dio keeps describing his mother as a saint, right? Someone who's saintly and who's very noble and who never really wants to hurt other people. That's sort of her defining characteristic. She's generous and kind, but also she's weak and cowardly. That's the Petersonian perspective, let's say, because she never affects herself into the world, and that's a very dangerous thing. It's also a cowardly thing because she isn't. Well, how can I say this? Let me put it this way. The word selfless, right? There's this sort of generic definition of that word where, you're supposed to be kind and generous, but also it's sort of built into the way the word is constructed. Selfless. There is a very real threat of completely disregarding yourself, of losing yourself. And what Peterson is saying when he says, stand up straight with your shoulders back, is to build yourself into someone who can tolerate, challenges and the misery of the world, no matter what it is. And once you have that self, to be then selfless is to put someone else on top, ahead of yourself, right? So you have a self, but it is not the most significant priority that you have. That's a much more valuable place to be than simply to abandon yourself and to completely accept the whims of others because, unlike Dio's mother, we can't be so saintly. We ultimately get crushed into resentment and into hating others and into being cruel to others. And that's a much more volatile, dangerous place to be that ultimately corrupts and destroys our soul. And I think that is what happens to Dio in Over Heaven. It's just in a much more... Dio's a lot more clinical about the way that he affects his revenge onto not only his father, but also onto the world, right? Also, he turns into a vampire and he starts creating an army of zombies. So it works in that sense because it's fiction, right? So there's a little bit of leeway, but by and large, that is exactly the story that is being told in Over Heaven. So I thought that was a really cool parallel that these two books that I'm reading at the same time have these really strong connection. Other than that, I think, a lot of people describe Peterson as being pseudoscientific. And you can see why. You look at the construction of this chapter, and it's not just like point A, point B, point C, point D. It's he literally just bounces between he pinballs through like 20 different fields and topics all over the place. He goes from talking about lobsters at the start, and then talking about birds, and then talking about dominance hierarchies, and then talking about positive feedback loops, microphones, drunkenness. It's just everything that can possibly apply in a situation. He just throws it all in there. But most importantly, he's talking about evolution and the biological basis. He's talking about serotonin. And it kind of made me think, this is sort of science fiction-y, right? So you can sort of discard it if you want, if anyone's listening. Now that the chapter itself is finished. But I kind of started thinking about this as a thought experiment. If humans had this capacity, let's say, to ignore, if we developed a new form of human, whether it's through genetic modification or if we can edit the soul itself somehow in the future, like I said, very science fiction-y, but we got rid of this ability to have this biological counter in our brain that calculates our status, right? If we completely, I wouldn't say removed it, but instead it was just a constant, right? We never ever have a deficit of serotonin, so we're never really depressed, but we never have a surplus, so we never really know what we're lacking, you never really think back on the time when, that's when I was really happy, that's when I was blissful, that's when I was content. without that comparison point, with a static serotonin level at all times, you're never really motivated to, pursue it anymore. You never really seek the same level of status that Jordan Peterson describes in the dominance hierarchy, is what motivates the dominance hierarchy and ultimately sets it up. And I was wondering, is that a valid price to completely redefine the human condition? Part of what motivated this specifically is that Peterson talks about how terrible it is for people at the bottom of the dominance hierarchy. And you got to wonder, is it fair that the hierarchy exists at all if the people at the bottom are being treated like this, and then the people at the top are completely in a different world, essentially? It's like, I haven't watched Alita, Battle Angel. I haven't even watched the anime OVA that came out in the 80s, nor have I read the manga, but I know that they live there's a city at the top, right? There's a city that sort of is literally escaping Earth, so to speak. It's like heaven, And then there's just this junk pile that is on the surface of Earth. And you got to wonder, like, what if there was some way to equalize it? That's essentially the motivation behind this thought experiment. The average contentment of the human experience is also the contentment of every individual human life. Does that make sense? I hope I laid that out clear enough. It's sort of, it's a communistic idea. It's a Marxist idea, sort of, in principle. But the question isn't, like, how do we bring heaven down onto earth? That's not what I'm asking, really. It's, is it worth it to change all of human nature in order to affect it? And that's a very different thing. And I don't really have a solid answer. It's just a question that I thought was interesting. If you guys are interested in exploring this question a little bit deeper, then I greatly, highly recommend the anime Shin Sekai Yori, which translated from Japanese means From the New World. And it's essentially set 1,000 years in the future, where humans develop these new superpowers, but a lot of the most significant parts of the human condition still haven't changed. So, like, mental illness is still a problem, obviously. And most importantly, a lot of these humans 1,000 years in the future have made significant changes to what it means to be human until they have basically lost their humanity. And I don't mean that in a sort of like, Blade Runner way where they don't recognize beauty and they don't recognize compassion or anything like that. I mean, like, literally on a biological genetic level, they have lost a significant portion of what it means to be human. But it's for this price of, well, it's what we need to do in order to ensure a stable society with these new powers that humanity has developed. And the show, too, for what it's worth, also leaves this question open of, is it worth it? And what, in that situation, what does it mean to be a human, really? And I think the answers that it gives, or not the answers, but the way it provokes that question is honestly one of the best that I've ever seen in any medium. So I highly, highly recommend that show, From the New World, or in Japanese, Shin Sekai Yori. Fantastic stuff. Anyway, we're only one rule into this, and already I think the Hail Hydra gimmick is already showing how, like, flawed it is, because at no point do these ideas ever intersect. Like a Venn diagram, there's no overlap where it's like, oh yeah, I see where Ta-Nehisi Coates derived this parallel. No, he literally did it just to run Jordan Peterson's name through the mud. And it's a really sort of cowardly and petty thing to do. And more than that, every time I say Hail Hydra, I sort of forget what the phrase even means, to the point that, I actually forgot what words I was supposed to say, at least a couple of the times. I almost said hallelujah once. I straight up just blanked out on what I was supposed to say once. And this is what happens when you sort of have to abide by an ideology and you have to say what they have to say until they lose all their meaning, whatever meaning that they had, because you don't say them for their meaning. You just say them so that you can sort of tell other people that, oh yeah, I agree with you. Hail Hydra. Yeah. I don't even know what this word means anymore, but you and I both, we're making eye contact. We both understand what it means. So I think, if anything, the Hail Hydra gimmick reveals a lot of what Peterson says about ideologies and how they just sort of sit in your brain without making you think, without changing who you are, without challenging you, without helping you grow. And of course, he talked about that quite a bit in Rule 1 as well, where if you if you develop courage, if you stand up straight with your shoulders back, if you expose yourself to the world, then you immediately become challenged, but also you relish the challenge. This ideological tendency to simply shut out the world with your own beliefs is just another way of cowering, not standing up straight with your shoulders back. So yeah, that's a nice little postscript, I guess. I appreciate that anyone who's listening probably doesn't really care about my commentary on this book. So if that's the case, then I will leave you with one clip from a Jordan Peterson video that I watched. Right at the end, he was talking about facing the... I close the book, so I need to re-find the page. Let's see what he says. Thus emboldened, you will embark on the voyage of your life. Let your light shine, so to speak, on the heavenly hill and pursue your rightful destiny. Hail Hydra. One of my favorite Jordan Peterson clips is him sort of recapitulating on that idea. And he brings about an image of a church that is in Montreal that I've actually gone to. It's more of a cathedral, actually. It's one of the biggest cathedrals in Canada. It's a beautiful, beautiful place. And he talks about it in this clip that I want to show you. And he's talking about a similar idea of finding yourself on that heavenly hill and expressing yourself. Well, not really expressing yourself, but rather taking up your burden no matter what it is. And I think that's a very inspirational thing. I think it's a very well-spoken clip. It's amazing that he can just say this stuff live, without really having to structure his thoughts. And so I really respect him for that as well as all the other stuff that he actually has to say. Let's roll the clip. And I hope you guys enjoy. I'll see you guys in the next. For rule number 2, I suppose. Hail Hydra.
So I was thinking the other day, a week ago, I was thinking about this. I had this little fantasy that entered my mind. I was thinking about St. Joseph's Oratorio in Montreal. And St. Joseph's Oratorio is a very large religious building. It's one of the biggest cathedral-like structures in the world. And it's set on the hill on Mount Royal, and it's set up where it can catch the sun. So it's an image of the heavenly city on the hill, right? It's an image of the structures that we strive to create. That's what it is, independent of its specifically Christian or religious function. That's what it stands for symbolically. Okay, so it's the city on the hill. It's what we're striving towards when we walk uphill in life. Okay, now, the way the oratorio is structured, there's hundreds of steps leading to it up the front. And in the early part of the 20th century, a lot of people who had physical disabilities came there, and they struggled up the step on their crutches, and many of them left their crutches in the oratorio. You can see hundreds of them if you go there. It's quite an interesting sight. And I was thinking about that, and I was thinking about what that meant, and this is what it means. It means that, everyone has their disabilities, let's say, and I know that some people are far more terribly affected than other people. I'm perfectly aware of that. But the question is, what do you do about that? And what you do is you set yourself up on your damn crutches and you struggle up the bloody hill. That's what you do. And you struggle up the hill towards the kingdom of God. That's what you do. Because the alternative is to descend into the abyss. That's the alternative. And then so to say, well, do you believe? It's like, I believe that you should struggle uphill towards the city of God on your crutches. That's what you should do. That's the opposite of the descent into the abyss. And so that's at the foundation of our civilization, that idea. Well, argue with it if you will. See if you can figure out why that's not an acceptable idea. Maybe you should help someone struggle up the hill. Perhaps you should. You can lend a hand to someone, although you don't want to take the burden away from them entirely, because there's something noble about struggling up the damn hill, right? That's adventure. That's the call to proper being. It's like, well, we don't need to forget this. We don't need to forget it. The universities have been there since time immemorial to try to push that idea forward through the generations. And everyone needs to know that idea. That's what gives your life not happiness. Forget about that. If it comes, well, great, accept it. Dignity, nobility, character, truth, responsibility, beauty. Those are the things to aim for.